everyone, it's Mari here for episode number 10 of Tried, Trendy, and True. Today I'm going to be making a single layer card design for you. I'm going to be using some of the products here that you see on my table, as well as a few other things that will show up along the way in the process. Now I really wanted to focus on this single layer design today, using that on the right there, the masking paper, and I have some of the dies chosen out from the Honeybee Stamps Sweet Stacks rectangle die set. So I'm going to be die cutting out some masks for my single layer card. And I'm also going to be using this really adorable stamp set here from My Favorite Things. This is the Crafty Companion stamp set. I'm only going to be using a couple of stamps from this set, but I absolutely love all of these sweet little images and sentiments that are just perfect for sending a card for many different types of occasions. That sweet little bunny is going to be one of the focal images for my card front today, as well as that little knitting basket that's going to coordinate along with the little bunny in my scene. Now I'm going to start off here with these dies here and my masking paper. This is some pardon me, some Simon Says Stamp masking paper. I have this ready to die cut out to create a rectangle die in the center and then a frame for the outside edges of my card front. So I'm going to get those all die cut out and ready to go. And I'm also going to do some stamping here. This is some white cardstock that I have cut with the largest rectangle die from the Sweet Stacks dies. And this is going to be the base for my card front. Now I'm using the masking paper that I've die cut out already here. I'm just going to use this frame piece here to help me to decide where I want my little scene to be built on my card front. So I'm going to just place that masking paper. I haven't taken the backing off of it yet, so it doesn't have any of the sticky portion of it exposed yet. It's still got the backer on it, and I just wanted to use it just to help me place my stamp images here so that I know exactly where I want these to be when that rectangle frame is going to be on my card. So here you can just see that I'm placing the stamps and getting those all ready in the placement to be stamped onto that white cardstock. So once I'm happy with how those are on my paper here, I'm going to swing the door of the MISTI shut to pick up those stamps. And that is just going to apply those stamps onto the door of my MISTI. I will then be ready to ink up those stamps and stamp them onto my cardstock. I can take that mask now and just set that to the side now that I know what the placement is for my images. And now I'm going to stamp these out with some Copic friendly ink. Before they do that, I'm just going to condition my stamp here a little bit by wiping my finger over it. This is the first time I'm using this stamp, so I just wanted to make sure that any film that might be on that photopolymer product there from the processing of the stamp, I want to just make sure that film was all off of there. And now you can just see I've stamped that or inked that up with some Copic friendly ink, the Memento Tuxedo Black. I'm going to use my Stampendous pressure tool here to help me get this all stamped out nicely onto my white cardstock. And once I have done that, I will be ready to color up these images. Now I'm also going to stamp these images out onto my masking paper as well. I'm making sure that I'm stamping on the side of the masking paper that is going to have the sticky on the back. That's important because then, you know, you're stamping it in the right orientation for sticking over top of your stamped image. I've got those all fussy cut out now. I'm going to set those masks aside. And meanwhile, I'm going to work on my scene here. I'm going to start this process here of coloring the scene by doing some Copic marker coloring. I'm showing you some of the gray colors that I was thinking about using. I don't use all of those colors of gray. I'm going to just use a couple, and I will show you the colors on the caps while I'm coloring, and I'm going to just do some really, really basic coloring here. While I'm coloring, I'm going to talk to you about why I chose to do a single layer card design here today. I chose this because I feel like during the pandemic, we have been sending a lot more cards through the mail than we normally do. At least I have been. Lots of times I will hand deliver cards to people rather than sending them through the mail. And when I'm hand delivering a card, my card design tends to be a lot different than if I'm mailing it. So if I know if I'm going to mail something, I'm not going to add all of that dimension, all of the little bits that make the card thick or that sort of thing. I'm going to probably just choose a single layer card like this one. And that is really, I think, what's one of the reasons why single layer cards are really trending right now, even though this is a type of card design that's been around since the beginning of card making, let's face it. It's one of those go-to designs that's been around for a long time that I feel like is just a go-to. But during the pandemic, like I said, I've just been mailing way more. And so I feel like we're looking for more inspiration these days for single layer cards that are maybe a little bit more simple in the sense that they don't have sort of like all of the dimensional elements that you might add. Now, you can actually make a really complicated single layer card. They don't have to be simple. You can add as much detail to them as you would like through different coloring methods and different techniques that you can do. So the Copic markers, one different type of method that you can use to color up your card images here or your stamped out images. And that's what I chose to do here for my project today. So you can just see here, I'm just using a 2-color blend for all of my different colored areas. So my little bunny, I just used some really, really nice soft grays and soft pinks. Just trying to create a little bit of a shadow, maybe more on the left side of the bunny in those different areas there that I've colored, and kind of doing the same thing here with the basket with the yellows and pinks. Really going for sort of a really soft pastel look with this project. I just thought that that really matched up nicely with these images that I used to stamp out this card. So here I'm just going in with the darker pink for the checkers on that basket to shade those a little bit. Wanted to use a little bit of a really pretty pastel blue as well on my project, and that's going to be the yarn section, and just finishing up coloring that basket. Now I will move on to some of the other areas back over on the bunny. So I'm going to color up the little project that the bunny is knitting, and just wanted to use again the blue-green there, that really soft pretty blue for that portion of the card. So loving how that's looking. Again, just doing the darker color over to the left to create a little bit of a shadow. That just gives your coloring a little bit of depth. And I am not by any stretch a perfect or professional Copic marker colorer. I just love using Copics because I find that they're really, really simple. And it's a super fast way to add some pigment to your projects. So the key here is to use a paper that is Copic friendly and to also use an ink that's Copic friendly as well. So the Memento Tuxedo Black ink fits that bill, and I am using some Hammermill cardstock here. This is a 100-pound white Hammermill paper. Now I really love this Ink Blot Shop stamp set. This is called Get Grounded, and this is perfect for doing a single layer card where you want to create a scene. So now I'm going to start to use some of the masking paper in this next portion of my scene building process. Now I really wanted to use these 2 little cloud stamps. So what I decided to do was go ahead and put that rectangle mask on. And once again, I have not taken the backer off this yet. I will eventually, but at this point, I'm still just using this to help me figure out where I want things and to sort of mask off when I do this first layer of stamping using the mask. I did want to use this little open area here for my sentiment. So I like to kind of plan out where my sentiment's going to go when I'm doing a card design. And now to create my true single layer and using these masks, I'm going to start off by masking off the bunny. So I took the backer off the masking paper, and now my bunny stamped image is sticky. So I'm going to stick that down over top of the bunny. I'm going to do the same thing with the basket, and then the same thing with the little ball of yarn that's on the card there. Now I'm going to use this stamp from the Get Grounded set that's going to create the little bit of foliage and grass and whatnot on in front of the bunny and the basket. So when you're working on a single layer card, always stamp out the images that you want to be in the sort of, the main images of your card. Stamp those first, and anything that you want to be behind it, then you stamp out subsequently and layer on top. So I wanted the grass and the foliage and whatnot to be behind the basket and behind the bunny. So the bunny in the basket had to be stamped out first and then masked. Then I stamped out that stamp, and you can see how it only stamped to the edges of where that rectangle mask was. Now I'm going to mask off the clouds as well, and I'm going to do some ink blending here. So what I need to do now is put my rectangle mask down. So I've taken the backer off of that rectangle. I've put that down onto my project here. So you can see that the edges of my project, there's a nice thick margin, probably about 3/4 of an inch, all the way around the edge of my sweet little scene. And now I've also just taken my masking paper and I've created a mask with just sort of like a little wavy edge that's going to create sort of like another little grassy border behind my bunny and my basket here. So I'm going to mask that area off before I start to ink blend my sky area. So I'm going to take some sticky grid from Sizzix, and I'm going to, this is just a double-sided adhesive here that's kind of like a Post-it note, double-sided adhesive here to go ahead and stick that down to my table so that when I am ink blending, my project isn't going to move on me here. It's going to stay put on my table. Now I'm going to start off with some Pink Fresh Sky Blue ink and my Gina K ink blending brush here. And I'm going to go ahead and do some ink blending over top of my masks. And this is going to allow my clouds to stay white, and it's going to allow my bunny and my little yarn basket there all to be covered up so that this ink doesn't get on any of those images. And I'm just making sure as I go along here that my masks are in place. I should have just cut that knitting needle off that's by the bunny there. I shouldn't have bothered cutting around that because it doesn't really matter. Any small area like that, you don't really have to mask it off. I'm not going to end up coloring that anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But here you can just see I'm going to just go over this entire sky area for my project to get some really pretty sky blue color. Love the Pink Fresh inks for ink blending. They're just so lovely. I love the color palette as well. They just have such beautiful ink pads. They're gorgeous. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish that up. I wanted a little bit of kind of like a greeny blue at the very top. So I'm going in with some aquamarine, and I'm just going to blend that at the sort of around the top edges of my sky. And that's just going to coordinate nicely with some of the colors of my markers that I used to color up my images. Now I'm using Grassy Knoll from Pink Fresh again. I've switched out my blending brushes here. This is a Honeybee Stamps blending brush, and I'm using the green to color in the grass. So here you can just see I removed the mask that I had placed down before to mask off the grass area. And now I'm just going in. I'm not worried about this blending in with the blue a little bit. It didn't really matter to me. I don't really need a hard line between the blue and the green. Those are two colors that blend nicely together, and I just thought that was fine. But of course I still have my bunny and my basket masked off so that none of this green is getting onto those. So here you can just see the single layer card coming together. Now I'm going to go ahead and reveal how this ink blending is going to look by removing the mask. You can purchase masks that are plastic. They're like a stencil, but they're a mask. You can actually purchase those and reuse them over and over again. If you don't have the budget for that, you can totally use masking paper. I'm going to save these masks that I used for the bunny in the basket. I won't save this rectangle mask, but you definitely could. It's totally up to you, but the smaller pieces of masking paper are a little bit easier to save than something like this. This is going to curl up and kind of get stuck together, but if you're really careful and you do a better job of it, you could probably save that one too. But yeah, so you can purchase these masks. They are commercially made, obviously, as well, but the more economical way of doing it is definitely to have some masking paper and make your own masks. So there you can just see I'm just slowly but surely revealing all of these different images. You can just see the beautiful white border that we're left with around our little scene in the focal area of the middle part of our card. Love the reveal always when the masks are taken off. I think it's just so much fun. And I'm just using the very edge of my scissor here to pick up the edge of the mask, and I'm just gingerly slowly taking those off, and I will set those aside. I'll put the backer back on these little masks and I will reuse them. The clouds, I didn't have to make a mask for this project because I had used them before for the same purpose, and I had the masks saved with the stamp set. So I was just able to reuse those cloud masks again. So you can reuse this paper over and over again as long as you don't get anything on the sticky portion of the mask. You can just keep on using that, which is really great. And I love that about creating masks with masking paper. Just going to finish off the reveal here by taking the mask off that little piece of yarn there. And I just love this. I think it's so crisp and pretty. You can add lots of little details to this without adding any dimension that will make it just even more fun and special and unique, right? Because it's handmade. You've made it. You can add all of your own special little details. I'm just showing you there how I've created that little line of the grassy hill kind of behind the bunny and the basket, just to create that impression again of the fact that the bunny and the basket are on grass and then the beautiful blue skies in the background. And it just really helps to create this really fun, pretty little scene. Now, this rectangle piece that was cut from the original dies, you could totally put that over top of the center area and you could add some other details to your border. For example, you could take a background stamp like this one and you could add some detail to the border by stamping onto that area once you mask off the center. Lots of different options of making this even more unique and special. I chose not to do that. I really like just that white, open space around the edge, but you could definitely do that. Now, I also took a stitched die from my stash. This is a stitched rectangle die from My Favorite Things. And I die cut out my panel with that die just to create a little more detail with that really nice, simple stitched edge around the edge of my card front. Love that finishing detail. I think it's just really pretty. Now, I'm also thinking about how I want to use a sentiment. I definitely wanted to use one of the sentiments from this stamp set, but I'm going to decide to use it on the inside of my card because I felt like it just didn't really fit the space that I have to work with here on my project. So that From My Hands to Your Heart is just a really great sentiment. It goes along so well with the images that I chose for my project, but I am going to stamp that on the inside of my card instead. So what I chose to do for a sentiment is coming up here in a little bit. I will show you that for sure, but I did want to show you that I'm using some Concord and Ninth Ballet Slipper, really pretty soft pink, as my card base. So this is just an A2 size card base here that I've cut and scored, and you can just see how pretty that is. Just a really nice, lovely pastel pink. And again, I don't want to add any dimension to this card by adding this with foam adhesive. So I'm just going to take my Gina K tape runner here and add that to the back of my card front here. And now I'm just going to take and line this up with my card base and add that on to my card. So there you have just that really pretty soft pink that coordinates so nicely with the coloring that I've done for the card. And yeah, just looks really nice and soft and pretty. I love it. I love how this turned out. I think it's just so sweet, and love the MFT stamps. They're always like just some of my favorites for sure. Now, this is a sentiment that I'm going to use from Pink Fresh Studio. This is from the Perfect Sentiment set. And I actually used the Perfect Sentiments hot foil plate. And I created the sentiment using that hot foil plate and some gold foil. And then I used the Perfect Sentiments die as well to die cut out this sentiment for my card front. I'm going to add that on with a little bit of adhesive. Once again, no dimension at all. I'm using my honeybee tweezers here to help me position this into where I want this on my card front. And I just love that. The simplicity is beautiful. The versatility of the sentiment hello is so fantastic. I use that type of sentiment on my cards a lot just because I don't always know what I want to use a card for. So hello is just a really nice generic sentiment for a project. And now I'm just going to take that sentiment that I mentioned earlier from the Crafty Companions set and stamp that onto the inside of my card here. So I'm just going to take this, put it back into my MISTI, and I'm going to put it in sideways so that it fits, obviously. making sure that I know which side is the top and bottom of the card, which side is the actual left and right side of the card when it's in the right orientation. And I'm going to place the stamp onto the card on the inside and get that ready to stamp the sentiment here. So you can just see that I'm going to just eyeball it. But when I do close the door of the Misty, I use the grid lines on the door of the Misty just to make sure that I'm happy with the placement, make sure that it looks like it's straight. And once I'm happy with the placement there, I am going to go ahead and stamp this out. Now, to stamp this out, I did use a really nice crisp black ink. I'm using some VersaFine Claire Nocturne ink. And this is going to just stamp this out in a really nice way with just a really nice, beautiful, crisp black. And I love how that looks on the inside. It's just really simple, but yet effective. I love that sentiment. I think it's just really, really lovely. And I'm excited about how this has turned out and for the recipient to receive this project when I mail it off to them. So I just want to make sure that I clean up any of that ink on the door of my Misty. It probably wouldn't go on the card, but just wanted to make sure. And that is going to finish off the main parts of the card. Now, you can add lots of little details that are not going to add dimension to the card, that are going to just really make it look even better. So I'm going to take some clear Wink of Stella, and that's just going to add a little bit of shimmer to the areas that I add this to. So I'm going to add this to my bunny and the basket for sure. And the Copic marker is not going to be bothered at all by this Wink of Stella. This is not going to reactivate that alcohol ink marker. That is permanent and it's not going anywhere. So I'm just going to go over that area that I have colored with my markers with this Wink of Stella to add that little bit of sparkle and shine to my card. And I really love the effect that I get with this shimmer pen. It just looks really beautiful. So just going to finish that up and get that onto those little areas there. And I also wanted to add a few other little details to my card with some other different little options that I have. This is one of my very most favorite parts of creating a card, is just looking at the different things that I have in my stash to add the details, right? So I'm going to add a little bit of black glaze pen, and the black glaze pen is really fun because it dries dimensional. You have to be really careful. What I like to do when I'm starting with this is just take it to a piece of scrap paper and make sure that it's actually coming out of the pen properly. And then I'll just take it to the area that I want to put it in, and I'll just kind of tap it in. And because it does run out of the pen quite fast. And so I'll just tap that in and get a really nice little dimensional black impression, I should say, on the eyes of my little bunny. So that's one thing that you can do. I've also taken some Prismacolor pencils and colored in the leaves that are in that ink blot shop image that I used there for that grounding image. I just took my dark green pencil and went over the leaves so that they stand out a little bit more. And now I'm just going to take a bunch of different colored stickles and add that little bit of extra glimmer. I'm a little bit of a, stickles lover. I don't know really what you would say, but I really do love the stickles. And I often finish my cards off with just this little bit of extra bling and shine. So to the pink areas, I'm just going to add a tiny little bit of the pink stickles, and so on and so forth, just adding in a little bit of that mint green, the yellow. And then I think the one that looks white is actually unicorn. So it does sparkle a little bit like an iridescent. And I love that. I love the effect that it gives when it's all finished. So when you're working on cards and you're thinking about mailing and you're concerned about the extra cost of shipping something that's going to be thick, or will this actually get to the recipient without it being damaged in some way? Think about creating a single layer card. They're a lot of fun to make. They do take a little bit of time depending on what you do with your project, but I just love it. I think the end result is so fun and totally worth the time that it takes to put these little single layer cards together. It's a trend right now during the pandemic that I think is just so awesome. but yet it's a technique that's been around for a really long time. So I love how these different things in our industry just keep sort of like coming around and making comebacks, and for whatever reason are, you know, more popular again, and sort of have a resurrection, so to speak, from the past. So I'm going to add a little bit of that unicorn to the clouds. I just think it adds just a really nice little bit of sparkle to the cloud area. And I'm just going to add just a tiny little bit, not too much, just a few little dots of this unicorn to the clouds and a few other little areas on my project. And that will basically wrap it up and finish it up. I'm just going to finish that off and add a few little dots up to the top. So make sure that you check out the blog post as well for this project. The supplies that I've used will be listed over on the blog as well. Just loved all of the different little products that I used today to create this card. I'm a huge fan of the My Favorite Things stamps. As I've said earlier, they just always come out with the best, sweetest little images, and love these stamp designs so much. They're adorable. And here you can just see I decided that I also want to do a little bit of the yellow stickles. And just going to make sure, I always like to make sure that the stickles are coming out. I'll put, do that on a little bit of paper so that I can make sure that my stickles are flowing and I'm not going to get, like a big gob, or that it's actually going to come out of the applicator. And there you can just see all of the beautiful sparkle and shine on the card. I love it. And then there's that sweet little sentiment on the inside. So this card is all ready to go. Once the stickles are dry, it will go into my card stash ready to be mailed off. And I'm also going to coordinate this with a honeybee stamps envelope. I love that the honeybee envelopes are just such beautiful colors. This is the Playful Pastels collection, and I am going to choose one that's yellow hue. And I love that these envelopes have coordinating patterns on the other side of them. So they are double-sided paper, and you can just see how the inside of that envelope has a really sweet pattern. It pairs so nicely with this project, and I just love it. I hope you enjoyed this today, friends. I hope you were inspired to make a single layer card and get into that stash of products that you have and make some fun cards. Thank you so much for joining me. Have an amazing day, everybody, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.